Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on which part of the world you have joined us from. My name is Shola Akinrade. I currently serve as president of the Academy. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's edition of the NAL Dialogue series. Our speaker today is none other than Professor Omofolabo Ajayi-Soyinka, Professor Emerita at the University of Cancer, who is speaking on why clap with one hand. I'll just leave it there. But we have a unique, a distinguished personality to chair the meeting. And I'll quickly introduce our chairperson, who is Her Excellency Erelu Bisi Adeleye-Fayemi. She's online. She's going to chair the session for us. OBC, as I call her, is a gender and development specialist, policy advocate, leadership coach, philanthropist, and writer. I said that the philanthropy hasn't reached my pocket. She has a Bachelor's of Arts 1984 from IFE and an MA in history. She refused to acknowledge that I was a teacher. She said I was only a tutorial master. From University of Ife, now OAU, and she did another MBA, an MA in Gender and Society 1992 from Middlesex University in the UK. She was director of Akina Mama Africa, an international development organization for African women based in the UK, with an African regional office in Kampala from 1991 to 2001. While she was director of Akina Mama, she established the African Women's Leadership Institute, a training and networking forum for young African women, which has produced well over 10,000 women leaders across Africa. She co-founded the African Women Development Fund, AWDF, the first Africa-wide grant-making foundation for women's organization based in Ghana, and served as the first CEO from 2001 to 2010. Let me skip. Mrs. Fayemi is founder of Above Whispers Media Foundation, specializing in leadership development for women. She runs an online community, abovewhispers.com, where she writes an immensely popular weekly column called Loud Whispers. She set up the Rapport Network, an online mentoring and support program for over 4,000 young women, and she served as UN Women Nigeria Senior Advisor from 2017 to 2018. She's currently a visiting senior research fellow at the African Leadership Center, King's College, University of London. As First Lady of Ekiti State, 2010 to 2014 and 2018 to 2022, Bisi used her platform to influence legal and policy frameworks and to mobilize resources from a wide range of stakeholders for the promotion and protection of the rights of women and girls. So you can agree with me that this is just an appropriate person to chair today's session. She has won so many awards. If I'm going to count, then we won't have a seminar this evening. But she's currently a member of both the regional and national steering committee of the African Women Leadership Network, a board member of the African Women's Development Fund, Ghana, board member, St. Ives Communication, owners of Women's Radio, Nigeria, and serves on the governing council of Elizabeth University, Nigeria. She's also a member of the Women's Leadership Board at the Women and Public Policy Program at the Harvard Kennedy School. Let me shut up and hand over the session to Her Excellency Erelu Bisi Adeleye-Fayemi. Bisi, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Prof, my dear senior brother, friend, and mentor of many years. Thank you for inviting me to do this. Good afternoon, or good morning, good evening, depending on where you are in the world, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I thank the National Academy of Letters for inviting me to be a part of this event. And I'm particularly pleased that this topic has been chosen for discussion today. Societies where women have a poor status and are unable to achieve their full potential struggle to meet development targets. Nigerian women participated actively in all stages of the country's development, from the pre-colonial period through post-colonial times. Our local history affirms that women held powerful positions and had a voice in decision-making processes. In spite of all this, Nigerian women still struggle for full recognition of their rights and personhood, and their role in democratic governance is severely restricted. Nigeria currently features poorly on most global indicators that measure gender equality and women's empowerment. The most recent Global Gender Gap Index of 2024 ranks Nigeria 125th out of 146 countries. The Global Gender Gap Index tracks economic opportunities, education, health, and political leadership. Nigeria fares badly in every single one of these sectors. This afternoon, we are going to be led in a discussion on what it means for a nation to attempt to clap with one hand, because that is what we are doing right now in Nigeria. In 1986, 39 years ago, I was a postgraduate student in the Department of History at University of Ife, now Obafemi Awolowo University. I met a female lecturer in the Department of Drama who took an interest in me and in the research I was doing on women's history. She became my mentor, guide, and senior friend. Her support for me back then boosted my confidence and enabled me to learn and grow. And I have never forgotten her kindness and generosity of spirit. She even took a week off to drive me around the old Ondo State for me to be able to do interviews for my field work in 1987. Even though years and geography might have kept us apart, I am truly grateful to be here this evening to introduce a great feminist scholar, teacher, creative artist, and thinker, Professor Omofolabo Ajayi-Soyinka. Professor Omofolabo Ajayi-Soyinka, BA French, PhD English, studied at the University of Ife, now OAU, and Leeds University. She was a foundation lecturer in the Department of Dramatic Arts at OAU. She was active in ASU and became the secretary of the OAU branch and the national delegate. She, however, became a target of General Ibrahim Babangida's clampdown on ASU in the 1980s. And so she left Nigeria for Cornell University in Ithaca on a gender-focused postdoctoral fellowship. Emerging as an interdisciplinary scholar, Professor Folabo secured a joint appointment in the Departments of Theater and Women's Studies at the University of Kansas, Lawrence, University of Kansas, Lawrence. Her teaching, research, and creative publications include performance, literary, cultural, and gender studies and theories. She is the author and co-author of several scholarly books and journal articles, and her creative publications span choreography, poetry, and short stories. Professor Ajayi-Soyinka retired as Professor Emeritus after 25 years at the University of Kansas. My dear Prof and dear mentor, big sister, and friend, it gives me great pleasure to invite you to present your thoughts to us. It's really an honor to be here with you this evening.
Wow. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, and for
no, Excellency.
We have to put that there. We have to put that there. It's out there. For reminding me of some long past days. Okay, without any more time spent on pleasantries and formalities, let me start with an overview, like, of what I'm talking about. I know many people have asked me, SLAP, why SLAP? What do you mean by SLAP? But I'm saying that through the lenses of African feminism, I explore how effectively the country's patriarchal structures and practices, especially in politics, have been impacted. African feminism is contextualized within Africans' historical and cultural experiences and as part of the global feminist movement, seeking equitable power distribution between men and women. It advocates gender equity without one gender subjugating the other, but rather creating the space of opportunities for all members of the society according to their abilities. In other words, African feminism advocates clapping with both hands to encourage, build up, and realize the continent's utmost potentials. As the first quarter of the 21st century draws to a close, it is incontrovertible that feminism and gender awareness have become part of Nigerian realities. This paper argues that despite more than a century-long history of activism for women's rights in Nigeria and the progress since made, the practice still falls behind the awareness in the country. The unfolding Akpoti-Akpabio scene in the Senate is a case in point. Gender relationship in the country remains riddled with power inequity at every level of the society. In our global interconnectedness, the repression of one gender is like a self-inflicted wound. When you have two hands, why clap with one hand? Okay, so there we go. I have 5 points, which I believe, thank you, is being shown. In the Nigerian patriarchy and its variables, I wonder, patriarchy in general is the rule of the primal males or males, the father, husband, or brother, over women and the rest of the population, at home or in the public, in almost all significant aspects of the society. It privileges men in the distribution of power and critical resources in the society. It deploys gender as a powerful and effective tool in enforcing and sustaining a power hierarchy that subordinates women to men in the society. However, patriarchy is contextualized culturally and historically, and each variety institutes its checks and balances that help to reduce the stranglehold of power of one group over the other. Nigeria, as we know, is a country of many nationalities. Before its 1914 creation by the British, each nationality had its own peculiar branch of patriarchy. And to borrow a phrase from a preeminent historian, Professor Bolanle Awe, there is, I quote, token recognition of female presence in the society, end of quote. Quite a number of these token recognitions create the space for women to assume leadership positions at different levels in the society. Religion, business, politics, or even as rulers, like the 17th century Amina, the warrior queen of Zazzau, today's Zaria, distinguished for her leadership qualities, military skills, and expansion of her kingdom. Among the Igbo people of Eastern Nigeria, we have the dual-sex political system, which gives women and men separate areas of political jurisdiction. The women's part is headed by the Omu, or the queen. She is a ruler selected in her own cognition. She is not the wife of the male ruler. Among her areas of authority are the market and domestic affairs, and she has her own police to enforce her laws and orders. However, difficult cases in the community are taken to the joint court of the Omu and Obi the king, and the male patriarch court has the final say. Although the patriarchal system in Yoruba land is less formal in its socio-political arrangements, there are designated titles based on merit with specific leadership responsibilities for women, such as Iyalode, the matron of public affairs, and Iyaloja, mother in charge of the market economy. There are also a few designated political positions of women in the kingdom's executive council by heritage and appointments. Age hierarchy often mitigates gender hierarchy among the Yorubas. But then, about the 18th century enters the colonial trauma and the imposition of a foreign patriarchal structure on existing ones. The 18th century is a particularly destabilizing time for the various nationalities and their patriarchies within that geographical space. Many are just recovering from the various territorial wars of expansion exacerbated by the Islamic jihad in the north and the European transatlantic slave trade. The colonial patriarchy is not like any regular patriarchy of men dominating women. It is men dominating women. Patriarchal power on steroid, I would say. Lord Lugard, the British colonial administrator and the architect of modern-day Nigeria, rationalizes the colonial project in part, quote, "We, the British that is, hold these countries because it is the genius of our race to colonize, to trade, and to govern," end of quote. And truly, it is the administration of total power over the existing patriarchies in the colonized areas. Implicit in Lugard's statements and the general colonial as the colonizers are the superior race, the upper class, the royalty, and the domineering male gender, while the colonized are the lower race, the lower class, and the dominated gender. Colonized women are caught between these two patriarchies in conflict, two main patriarchies in conflict, and their token recognition in society becomes endangered. Further underscoring the threat is the colonizers' Victorian era cult of domestic femininity. In Victorian England, respectable women, again, upper class women, are the queens of the domestic sphere, but have little role to play in public sphere. Two quotations for illustration. The first one is from Ruskin in 1865, where he states, "The man's power is active, progressive, defensive. He's eminently the doer, the creator, the discoverer, the defender. His intellect is for speculation and invention. His energy for energy, war, and for conquest. But the woman's power is for rule, but not for battle. And her intellect is not for invention or creation. She must be incorruptibly good, wise, not for her self-development, but for self-renunciation. Wise, not that she may set herself above her husband, but that her man may never fail from his side." Of course, the church, the divine authority, has to weigh in too. And from Jocelyn Cage, 1893, we learned that the church and state, both maintaining that she has ever been inferior and dependent, and man is superior and the ruler. End of quote. Needless to say, lower class women who must work and be seen in the public space in Victoria era, administering to the upper class, are not considered women of good repute. They are less. In the racist and classist ideology of the period, the colonized woman who has had her share of public space of command is now consigned to a new space of disrepute. Although by the turn of the century, laws have been passed to improve the general status of women in Britain and other European countries, colonized African women are not beneficiaries. The British system of indirect rule is another practice that eats into the women's sphere of authority. Since the British administrators are not culturally used to women being in charge in political affairs or public domain, they simply put men in charge of their newly created official structures, including positions previously held by women in the ancient patriarchies. Of course, the men are happy to grab this new space of power, and as will be seen later on, some even abuse that power. For post-independent patriarchy, patriarchy as the organizing social-political structure remains steadfast through the changing dynamics of Nigerian history. Post-independence patriarchy is not different, and for the most part, maintains the practice, the pastiche of patriarchy practiced under colonial power. As a significant development in the post-independence patriarch is the ubiquitous, quote, traditional woman. She is invoked whenever some post-independent clout in power or affiliated with power feels challenged by a woman insistent on demanding or protecting her rights. But the question is, which of the traditions exactly did this traditional woman arise from? 2, women navigating patriarchies in conflict. Women's response to the imposition of colonial way of life are strategic and selective. They embrace or adapt those that give them the opportunities, those colonial features that give them the opportunity, e.g., the modern system of formal education. And when they are aware of and understand how the new system marginalizes them, they put up fierce resistance, deploying the age-old protest system and used to force changes to policies they disagree with or find harmful to the community. One recurring area of disagreement under the colonial rule is excessive taxation. After the husbands and young sons have been taxed, the colonial officer is now set to tax women and their young daughters to raise money for colonial purposes. And this is a financial burden on the whole colonized family. There are 2 well-documented tax incidences, the Aba Women's War of 1929 and the Abeokuta Women's Revolt of the 1940s. The indigenous officers who have been cooperating with the colonial authorities bear the brunt of their fury. Aba women deployed the tactics of sitting on men, beating up and driving out the colonial appointed chiefs who were collecting taxes on behalf of the colonial administration. The Abeokuta Women's Revolt, led by Mrs. Kuti, succeed in forcing the abdication of the Alake, the king of Abeokuta, who had been particularly brutal in carrying out the colonial mandate. Ironically, Mrs. Kuti started her group, Christian Ladies Club, to promote British women's ethics and values to Egba women. 3, Nigeria at the cusp of independence, women's agency in partisan politics. The successes of the tax revolts, even if temporarily, and other revolts, and the continuing marginalization and erosion of women's rights caused many women's organizations to spring up across the country so as to salvage what they can of their traditional status while extracting what best serves them in the new social order emerging. The women start talking to each other, among them Mrs. Kuti of Abeokuta, Mrs. Margaret Ekpo of Aba, Mrs. Janet Okala of Onitsha, Mrs. Alice Obano of Benin City, and so on and so forth. After a two-day conference in August 1953, all the women organizations agree to come together as a single body known as the Federation of Nigerian Women's Societies. 5 years later, another coalition emerges, the National Council for Nigerian Women's Societies. Remarkably, none of the women's organization transitions into national political parties, even though the political party, the NNDP, has been in existence since 1929. And by 1954, at least 5 more political parties have been formed nationwide. Rather, they prefer to remain, the women's organizations prefer to remain as advocacy groups and affiliate with international women's organizations such as the Women's International Democratic Federation and the International Council of Women. Individual members, however, are free to join different political parties, and in no time, women's wings are created to accommodate them, but essentially to serve as what I call the sweepers, recruiting rural women or the parties. Now I'm talking about Mrs. Aduni Oluwole. 5 of the major political parties in existence by 1954 are founded and headed by men. The only notable exception is the Nigerian Commoners Liberal Party, founded by Aduni Oluwole, with male members in high numbers. Within 6 months, one of its candidates defeats the candidates of 2 major longer established parties, the Action Group and the NCNC, by winning a seat in Ilorin. Preacher, politician, professional theater founder, and performer, Mrs. Aduni Oluwole is not afraid to voice her opinions and follow through whenever she can. Unlike her male colleagues who are demanding an end to British colonization by 1956, Oluwole believes the proposed date is too early and sees her male colleagues as African colonialists. She shares her anti-independent views anywhere, including with the Olubadan, the Ibadan's city of Ibadan ruler, where she is chased out and called a harlot by Adelabu Adegoke, a very charismatic and popular Ibadan politician, male of course. She's eventually banished from the city of Ibadan. Unfortunately, she died too young at age 52 in 1957 in an auto-related accident injury. After her, no other political party, even as far as I know up to today, has been formed by women. And so the marginalization continues. And we have more structured, more contemporary African feminists with their perspectives, with the Nigerian perspective. And I'll just list some of the theories or the actions that they proposed. And I've listed those that I listed. I've listed them in the year of publication, first publication, not the year that they have been talked about or developed in classroom or at lectures and so on. So you have do I need to read that? I think we'll leave those on the screen for a while. They are in two parts because there are quite a number. And in fact, I've left many out. So I ask for apologies for those who are not mentioned among those who have proposed some theories dealing with the patriarchal situation and marginalization of women. In case you have not noticed, let me call attention to one common denominator in all these perspectives. They are theories. Theorizing is critical to understanding, and these feminist theories have dissected the power, imbalance, injustice, and dissatisfaction that patriarchy, along with its prime agent, gender dichotomy, has caused in human societies. Perhaps patriarchy was intended for convenience, and the biological sex was expedient in structuring social roles. However, there are unintended consequences that have become glaring and unbearable today, especially to women. Seems like that expediency needs an urgent review. Folklores in many cultures have recounted how women once ruled, but men overthrew them for one reason or another to establish patriarchy. Well, time has come for another review, and that's the feminist response. Maybe not to overthrow, but to dialogue on what is going wrong and find ways of resolving the discontents. This is essentially what these feminists and their theories are doing. The society has changed a lot since the hypothetical institution of patriarchy was evolved. However, after deconstructing the patriarchy, reconstruction needs to follow. Nature abhors vacuum. Feminists have unpacked patriarchy. What is being put together in the gap created. This gap creates problems that men and women often dig in as life-saving trenches at war fronts. It is in this way that I can digest what is going on between Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan and the Senate President, Akpabio. I will not bore you with details. The internet is full of them. But briefly, what we have is a junior female member of the Senate accusing a senior male member, none other than the Senate President himself, of sexual harassment. And, and then she accuses him of retaliating politically when she rejects him. Of course, he denies both allegations. Now, I am not weighing in on the truth in the allegations or the culpability or innocence of the Senate President, but I am merely asking that the Senate lives up to its mission to uphold the laws and the justice of the nation. After all, these senators campaign on the promise of including and increasing women participation in political affairs. Nigeria, by the way, has a dismal record of female representation in political affairs, even among other African countries. A proper procedure would be to set up an independent case to find out the truth of the allegations. Instead, Senator Natasha is tried on unrelated offenses. And the Senate of 109 members, 4 women and 105 men, vote to suspend her for 6 months for not following some Senate procedures. Natasha Akpoti Uduagan, articulate, well-educated, and outspoken, is not keeping quiet. She is making her voice felt and has taken her case to the international women's body. And she has good support from her constituency, especially among the youth who have benefited tremendously from her political work, from the political work she has done in the area, Kogi area. Then the next action from the Senate patriarchy is to try and unseat her under some shady deals worked out with the governor of her state. Of course, that failed. Some of her colleagues falsely accuse her of having 6 children for 6 different fathers. What bearing does that have on finding out the truth of the charges she brought in the first place? It is reminiscent of how Mrs. Aduni Oluwole was accused of being a harlot in 1955, and this is 2025. Her crime, Adunis Oluwole's crime, trying to share and put out her political views. Neither she, Mrs. Aduni Oluwole, nor Senator Akpoti conforms to the new contemporary traditional woman. And so they can be ridiculed and their complaints rubbished and turned against them. So what has changed? The government, the constitution, and every person of note pay homage to the representation of women in national affairs. But when problems arise, there are no direct paths to meaningful action. And this is where I'm exhorting African feminists, Nigerian feminists to look more into practical action, direct ways of effecting the promises and the documents that profess to like and to promote women's participation and reduce their marginalization in public affairs. Compared to the representation of women in socio-political activities some 75 years ago, what we have now is a giant step backwards. Now, let me close with this priceless quote from one commentator who is so impressed with the performance of younger feminists during the NSAS protests of 2019. And this is from Mr. Chuks Ejiro, who confessed his love for Nigerian feminists by saying, quote, "I usually don't like all these Nigerian feminists, especially those who are feminist keyboard warriors on Twitter. But you see, this NSAS protest has changed my view of them, especially the serious ones. I love all Nigerian feminists. Nigerians should all be proud of them for making us proud. We should even give them power for one term." End of quote.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you. Like I said, I'm concluding there and giving some time for discussion, especially since there's also a small panel that has been put together. And I will expand on other areas that I have skipped over and did not cover. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Prof. Of course, it was to be expected, but thank you for the amazing history lessons. Thank you for speaking truth to power, and thank you for the powerful reminders of the rich history that we have, of the rich legacy that we have as African feminists, as Nigerian women who have always resisted patriarchal oppression in one way or the other. And the fact that we are where we are now does not mean that there are times when we have not pushed back. We have always pushed back, and we are still pushing back. We probably just need to push harder, but not alone. This is where clapping with both hands comes in. So thank you very much, Prof. And now, Professor Akinade, I know that we have Professor Mabel Everioma as a discussant. Is she the only discussant we have, or are there more?
Yeah, she's the major discussant. Then everybody else can contribute thereafter. Professor Mabel is online, so she's ready.
Okay, Prof. Mabel, if you don't mind, please, I don't know what agreement you had with Professor Shola, but please, you have 5 minutes to respond to Professor Folabo. If you don't mind, so that we can have a robust discussion.
Well, my discussion is going to be robust, Your Excellency. So I appeal that you add 5 more minutes to my intervention. Well, let me start right away by thanking the President of the Nigerian Academy of Letters for giving me the opportunity to, touch the hem of Professor Omofolabo Ajayi-Soyinka's garment. Don't move away, just allow me to keep holding the hem of your skirt. And so to start with, the topic, why clap with one hand? Women and contemporary cultures in Nigeria underscores politics. And because the title is a query, we now ask, is she advocating teamwork? Of course she is. Does she mean that collaboration is of essence in whatever she seeks to affirm? I think she has done that. Despite the influx of the MRA, men's rights activism, or men going their own way approach, or approaches that we find in the social media especially. The topic implies some form of amputation, cutting off the hand implicitly, because clapping with one hand signifies working, action, or agency with just maybe 50% of the body. And where embodiment comes in, Professor Ajayi-Soyinka is an artist, a scholar of embodiment. And so she has brought that to the forefront today by insisting that the whole person of the woman should be recognized in whatever she does, whether in the sphere of culture, as narrators, as storytellers, or in the sphere of politics, active or just subdued politics. And because women are often referred to as the better half, I believe her focus on the hand as a symbol, therefore, takes us to where she ended her talk. It is one hand in different perspectives that men have used to hemline women in writing with one hand, with the gavel in the parliament, or with the stamp of policy. Women are often shoved off that active scene. And where we now consider culture, what Professor Soyinka has told us this evening, rings a lot of bells. There's the Arere metaphor that Mary Kolawole, God rest her soul, wrote about. The woman is considered to be the arerelode, you know, someone to be discounted in the corridor, in the domestic sphere. The scapegoat issue is also there in the sphere of religion, where women are considered to be scapegoats because they deceived the alpha man, the first man created by God. We also have the idea that the woman is symbolic of the earth. And so if the positive and the negative symbols are put together, we realize that be it economic determinism or the political hemlining of women, it can no longer continue, because central to cultural production are women as actors, dancers, singers, creators of, you know, life on the pages of books or texts, or even on the stage of performance. And so corroborating maleness by female politicians is what she has told us this evening not to accept. And where cultural agency is concerned, we have seen references to the works of female politicians, either at the local sphere or the national sphere. And so if ideology facilitates this rupture that she's talking about, how can we, because going together means going far, how is it possible for that distance to be covered by women, where that drastic approach is needed, not just in parliament, but in social media and in our quotidian lives? And so women need to have a voice to challenge inequities. They need to be visible, aside from being audible. And if it's domestic, if it's the domestic sphere or the external communal or national space, self-affirmation is important. I'm happy that she cited Oyewumi, Acholonu, Ogundipe Leslie, and what have you. It therefore means that we need a balance between women of the book, women who are, you know, educated, and the grassroots women who, before the advent of the colonialists, were able to hold their own. The yellow days, the women who took part in the Ogumwani, you know, against tax, even those who, you know, facilitated the abdication of Oba Ademola. Therefore, what we need to take away from her presentation this evening is that African feminisms, okay, in its plural form, need to spread, need to have a centrally African perspective that is not androcentric, that doesn't kowtow to the male theorist, but that, you know, highlights the essence of women in every sphere of life. And so making patriarchy central also means that there is the possibility of making matriarchy coexist with patriarchy, just as the Omu example that you gave, having that parallel form of rulership. And so to close this discussion this evening, I want to highlight the fact that the inadequacies pointed out would warrant a few steps. And the first is from the sixth part of your lecture, Women Reimagining the Political Landscape in the 21st Century. Like I said before, audibility and visibility in the political sphere, the need to carry out excavations. You see, Aduni Oluwole's case is not known to many. And those early women who were able to forge their path, their political pathway by affirming themselves, even participating in local government elections, in the constitutional conferences, should come back. That token that, is being used to massage our ego should be challenged. And that also means some form of rewriting, just as you have done this evening. Those who are able to visit the libraries, listen to stories, know what went on when women were strong women without being made namby-pamby by education, by religion, by contemporary ideologies, should be looked into. And so if we are talking about post-military regime, how do we centralize that need to carry women all along? Because as it is now, it's only we educated women, talking to ourselves, speaking to ourselves. Those who are not literate, who have some form of political forte, who are consulted in the villages during the political processes, should also be part of the movement. Their stories heard. Even the woman who was killed in Kogi has her story. Studies could be carried out to find out the circumstances of her political, life before she was killed, of course, by the men. And so that politics you have advocated tonight is one that I believe many of us subscribe to, and is one that shouldn't just be within academia, but should, encapsulate the grassroots, the villages, communities, where women who have not seen the four walls of the university, who don't know what feminism is all about, want to be like Queen Amina, who didn't read books about feminism, but was able to hold her own. And so if they want us to clap with one hand, I think that hand with which the men, the gavel, the pen, the stamp, and political pronouncements could be held for us to have that pertinent conversation that women refuse to clap with one hand. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Mabel. And that was extremely helpful. And I like the references you made to women's, the need for women's audibility, the visibility, and the need for memory, because that is something that is extremely problematic in these times. So thank you very much for referencing that. So I see some hands up. So I'm not sure how to address people. So please forgive me if I unilaterally make you a professor, or if I just, say Miss Adeboye or Mr. Sogolo, or because I'm assuming that every member of NAL is a professor, or mostly. Yeah. Okay, so Madam, okay, Professor Sogolo.
Okay.
2 minutes, 2 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Well, I'm just saying we shouldn't call you Your Excellency because we are used to this. And it's difficult not to do that. I want to congratulate first the president of NAL for bringing this fresh perspective into our dialogue. It is very, very interesting. And I want to say that Professor Ajayi-Soyinka has really, this is her area. So we were really expecting that it would be this. Congratulations. But there's this point that I'm not too clear of. When Professor Ajayi-Soyinka made the distinction between patriots of the past and feminists of recent times, and towards the end, she seems to give the instances of the two of this distinction using Aduni, Oluwole, and then Natasha Odwa. And it wasn't too clear how these two, exemplify that distinction, of the former wanted to overthrow entirely, and then the latter, being more moderate and accommodating, the men, but wanted to live side by men. That's the impression I have. I don't know whether these two women who moved into the space, I call it space, that is really dominated by men, because they went into the political arena, which they know very well that this arena is dominated by men. Not just that it is dominated by men, but that men, most of them are, they have this attitude of male chauvinism. And it was to be expected if a woman steps into that space and want to participate there. But the point I really want a little clarified is that distinction between the patriots or the feminists of the past and the female feminists of recent times. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Professor Folabo, I think what we could do is take in a number of questions, and then you will have a right of response. And I think some people will just want to make comments and not necessarily ask questions. So we now have a specific question from Professor Godwin. So I'll now move to Professor Adeboye. She's had her hand up, and after that on to Professor Shidari.
Thank you very much, Your
2 minutes,
Excellency.
please.
Thank you. My question has to do with the conclusion by the presenter, Professor Ajayi-Soyinka. In a slide, I saw something about the Kajori concept, which is our prescription for the future. I would like her to throw more light on that. Who are the people that are supposed to come together? Is it about the educated and non-educated women, just like Professor Mabel advised? Or is it the old generation and the new generation? Or is it the different presentations of genders that we have now? What exactly do you mean, Ma, with this Kajori concept? And how do you think this can be actualized? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. So that was a specific question. Then on to Professor Shindare, and I think I'll take one more question after him and then give Professor Folabo an opportunity to respond. So, Prof, sir.
Yes, thank you very much. Folabo, Okusheo. I'm just looking at your metaphor of the two hands. And it really strikes me that when we talk about this, we have to go beyond the gender perimeter. Our society in Nigeria is one-handed in so many other ways. Has anybody ever asked why Nigeria has never produced a female governor? Has anybody ever asked why, or maybe people are asking, but we should be asking with a louder voice, above the whispers. Why our legislative houses are swamped by men, and there are very few women. The Apoti story that we are encountering now actually speaks to a major problem. That women are marginalized, they are outnumbered, so seriously outnumbered. So you want to take a vote, you know where it's going to be. It's going to go to just one hand. We were asking these questions in the 1980s when I was a member of Women in Nigeria, WIN. University of Ibadan campus there, I remember we were going for one of the meetings at the Institute of African Studies. And one or two of my colleagues were, are you, why, feminine? Are you female? I said, no, I'm not female, but I'm feminist. Because feminism is a social political construct. Oh, really? The point I'm making, very briefly, is our society is so socioeconomically, so devilishly unequal. It is not possible for us to talk about gender inequality without talking about socioeconomic inequality. In our country today, there are more women, more sex workers that are female, more than we've ever seen. Why? Inflation is there, everything is going down, and these are situations, these are socioeconomic situations that create the unevenness, the inequity we're talking about. I would like us to talk more about the fingers being not equal, but not leave it there. Why is the thumb always bigger than the index finger?
Thank you, Prof. And the last question I will take for now is from Professor Olu Obafemi. And then I'll hand it over to Professor Falabo.
Hello, thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency. I'd like also to join my voice with the voices that have congratulated Falabo for that very brilliant lecture, part of which I missed due to technology. What I heard, I did enjoy. I just have one statement and one question, very briefly. I know I have 2 minutes. Is African feminism summarized into accommodationism? Because when you talk of two hands, we can't clap one hand. It don't mean the two hands must be clapped. That for society to grow, the two hands must be together. And that is the preachment, as I take it, of womanism and African feminism. Personally, there can be no tetrarchy in my vocabulary. Where I come from, in Yoruba, part of Yoruba land, we have rules for individual for both sexes. In fact, the kingdom in my place was founded by a woman. And in the king's court, the king has his place, the female, the mother, called Yejigi, has her own role. So it's a mutual thing. It's a mutual growth. The two hands do clap together. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Prof. So, Professor Falabo, you have a number of questions, and there has been a commentary from Professor Mabel. So if you would like to take 5 minutes to respond to the issues that have been raised, and then we'll probably be able to do another round before we close.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, for organizing the questions. I want to express my special thanks to Professor Mabel for the way she had dissected what I tried to put together. She even did a better job than I did. So thank you very much. And I thank the questionnaires for all these questions, for giving me the opportunity to expand a little bit on the areas that I skipped or just glossed over because of time. I've been outed. The slide that I tried to keep back is out there in the public, so I will address it. Professor Sogolo, you asked the purpose of the comparison between Mrs. Oluwole and Senator Natasha. I used them first to gauge the distance. If in 1955, we had a woman who formed her own political party and even won a seat before her death. I mean, she didn't win, but one of her candidates did. And now, just to have a female representative in 2025 in the Senate, see how she's being treated. So there is that year time gap. I also used how she was treated by a popular and very charismatic, I mentioned it, male politician, Adelabu Adegoke Kpenkelemes, who drove Aduni Oluwole out because she was trying to, express her political views to who she thought would have the power to help her effect some changes. And she was called a harlot. She was not a harlot. But it's a way of demeaning and devaluing what she stood for and to silence her. And apparently she continued until she was driven, she was even banished from Ibadan. Meanwhile, equal treatment or similar treatment is meted out to Natasha Akpoti because she has the effrontery to complain publicly. She's on TV accusing the Senate president, that's a powerful position, of sexually harassing her. So again, another way of devaluing her. And then after he denies, okay, set up a panel, but no. They are suspending her for 6 months. They are trying to unseat her. Again, it's a warning. Don't you dare go into politics. And if you go, get there, keep your mouth shut. Take whatever you are dealt with. Sexual harassment is not a thing to do. I don't want to say that it didn't exist in our ancient patriarchies, but there were ways of dealing with them. And now in contemporary times, in the year 2025, sexual harassment of anybody is a no-go. So if you say that you are innocent, set up a system to prove you innocent. But those three things, the third one, both Wuraola and Natasha don't keep quiet. They know how to fight for their rights. So those three levels, that's where I brought the comparison together. Professor Adeboye, that's where I said I've been outed. The cajoling concept, I started, but I decided not to put it out there yet, because to fully develop it, the cajoling concept, to fully develop it would take too much of a time. So, and I forgot to remove it when I sent it to Professor Akinade. But you are right, it's the cajoling. First, as Professor Mabel had said, it's for women, the women who have the opportunity to take their knowledge to the women who are not so well, or who do not have that similar opportunity. Because they do not have that opportunity, for example, of using this public space like we have now, it does not mean they do not have anything to offer. After all, our mothers, our foremothers, who led the various revolts upon revolts against the colonial administration, they used their intelligence. The fact that they did not have access to the new style of life that the Europeans were introducing did not mean that they did not have intelligence. So that's on one level. The other level, and that's why I said, explaining it further, I said, if you want to go far, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So I'm also asking our male colleagues, male members of the society to join hands with us. It's the late Emerita Omofolabo who said everybody should be a feminist because we are all working together towards an advanced progressive society where we'll be able to take our seat among the League of Nations. So if we keep repressing all our capabilities and just insist on doing it alone, either as men or as women, or as theorists without the practical side, then we have a long way to go. We may go fast, and it's important that masculinity is now a developing field. And men are also complaining of how the energy to keep up with what is expected of them is really draining them. It's becoming a problem. So let's bring together our ideas. Where the shoe is paining you, where is pinching the other. Let's come together and try to put a common front, a progressive front. That's why I said it's easier to slap with one hand. I didn't develop that later, but I use it because we use slapping for discipline, and that's what we have been doing, using that hand to discipline women. Get back to your place, and instead of coming together to perform progress. Professor Oshundari, my dear brother, why there are more lawmakers? That's the area that was taking too long that I decided to sort of skip. One, like I said, they have the new Nigeria that we now have got the power from the Europeans who were used to dealing with men, from the colonizers. So they recognize the men. Then we have the military interlude, another macho organization. Where were the women? And, in addition to really abrogating the democratic development of the country, there's the military phase was a setback for us. So, and then time of campaigning, money. I should have mentioned that Mrs. Wuraola, before she died, her party more or less collapsed because of lack of funds. Whereas this shouldn't be. When traditionally, not the new tradition, women dominated the market economy, and many in the past. That has its own reason. And finally, Professor Olu Obafemi, another good brother of mine, says, does African feminism, if I get it right, equal accommodation? I don't know. Accommodation. Well, let me explain that the way I understand it. Because basically, feminism is against injustice. And so wherever there is that element of injustice rearing its head, feminism is there. So it incorporates, or maybe it accommodates, the quest for justice that feminism seeks for women. It expands it to include anywhere where there is injustice being perpetrated or performed. Thank you. Please let me know if I didn't cover your question completely.
Thank you very much, Prof. I don't see any hands up for another round. And I have one or two comments to make. So I don't know whether I should sneak in my comments now before people feel empowered to put up their hands. And then I don't have the opportunity. But I think as chair, I think I'm entitled to 2 or 3 minutes of my own to join in the conversation. Right, Prof?
Oh, yes.
I saw a question on the chat platform. And I think it's because I interchanged the names.
I don't see a question on my screen.
No, she asked, is Wuraola another name for Aduni Oluwole? I think I made the mistake. I interchanged
okay.
the names when I was talking, because I also had a segment on Mrs. Sasson. So anyway, that's
okay.
Yeah.
So I was part of a group of African feminist scholars, thinkers, writers, activists who came together in 2003 to start the African Feminist Congress. And that particular initiative didn't take off as we planned for a whole range of reasons, but we were able to regroup. And 3 years later, in 2006, we had the first African Feminist Forum in Accra, Ghana. And that is where we adopted the African Feminist Charter. So I would like those who have not seen the document already to kindly please look it up. And it's a document that we are proud of as African feminists, because for a change, we give something to the world instead of the world giving something to us. And we thought through what it meant for us to be feminists, working, thinking, operating in an African context. And we agreed that to us, feminism is a global struggle against all forms of patriarchal oppression. And therefore, our role as feminists was to interrogate these patriarchal structures, institutions, mechanisms, and see how we could then start to deconstruct, dismantle, or at the very least, challenge. And we were very clear that what we were doing was addressing these systems, these political systems, the economic systems, the cultural values, the religious systems, all these structures that minimize women, that make women have less of a voice, less of a presence, and less of a personhood. We were clear that we were not up against individual men. And so over time, this is how we have approached our thinking, our analysis, and our actions. And that's why these days, when I see debates online with the younger generation, turning conversations around feminism into a gender war. It's men against women. It's either a patriarchy or a matriarchy. If we have misogynists, then we have to have misandrists. And this is really counterproductive. And so I would not only like to thank Professor Omofolabo Ajayi-Soyinka for raising the conceptual issue around how possible it is for us to clap with one hand. I'd like to thank all those who have expressed an interest in accepting, to begin with, that we do have a patriarchy, because 40 years ago, this conversation would have been different. And there's a reason why I started with that anecdote about how I got to know Professor Omofolabo Ajayi-Soyinka when I was a young girl. She escorted me into the room when I had to defend my master's, not the dissertation itself, the proposal. And the questions that kept coming were something along the lines of, why do you want to do research on women's history? Where will you find the data? Why do you want to look at things that happened in the past through the lens of the present? And she stood up for me and she made it clear back then, even though she didn't use those words, that you can't clap with one hand. And so today, as a feminist thinker and activist, when I think of what it means to clap with one hand or to clap with two hands, I think of mutuality. I think of complementarity. I think of the fact that we cannot achieve any development goals if men and women do not work together. We cannot go any distance whatsoever in search of peace in our countries, peace and security, in search of economic development, in search of any kind of progress, if women do not have a voice, if women do not have a seat at the table, and if men are not prepared to interrogate their own patriarchal privileges, their powers, and also their abilities to convince other men to think progressively and do things differently. This is 2025, 30 years after the Beijing conference. I went to the Beijing conference as a young woman, and I had hopes and dreams and aspirations like everyone else about what the world would look like 30 years after. And here we are, 30 years after. We keep taking 10 steps forward and 20 back. And I know that the agenda of interrogating patriarchy, of dismantling oppression, is not something that is impossible. It's not something that we all have to be intentional about. And in some of the comments and the questions that have come up this evening in response to Professor Ofolabo's brilliant presentation to us, is that we all have a role to play. As scholars, what are you doing to interrogate these issues in your work? Are you one of those scholars who is still insisting that the world cannot change because that's how it's been? As teachers, what are you doing to encourage the next generation to think differently and do differently? What can we do about the death of stories and role modeling and all the things that we need to put in place to let young people know that we stand for certain values and principles as African persons? And for those of us in the academia who have never done anything outside of teaching, research, and theorizing, how prepared are you to share your gifts with the community at large? Are you prepared to go into public service, or are you prepared to act as advisors or do something that tries to bridge the gap between the academy and the community? So of course, these are questions that we'll have to keep asking, but I'm really glad that we've had this conversation, and it's going to be one, I hope, of many. Professor Shola Akinade, I hope you are going to assure us that this is not just going to be a one-off, that conversations around gender, around power, around feminism, and how we all own it, and our responsibilities in ensuring that things are done better is something that we continue to do. So I will I'll hand over to you, Prof, for you to sum up. But from the bottom of my heart, Professor Omofolabo Ajayi-Soyinka, thank you for sharing your wisdom with us, and it's been an honor and a privilege. So over to you, Professor Shola Akinade.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. You said you shouldn't call it, but you're still Your Excellency. So let me appreciate first our speaker. She's not a guest speaker. She's a fellow of the Academy, Professor Omofolabo Ajayi-Soyinka. I'm glad you agreed to do this, and I'm happy we're able to find a date for you to do it. You've ignited something which has started the conversations, and I hope we can continue. And I hope that Professor Mabel, at some point, can also give us some presentation on a related issue. She's such a fascinating speaker, and I've always found her very engaging. For those of us who are members of the Academy who are feminists, this is another challenge for us to take the conversations further. You don't have to be a woman to be a feminist. And we won't drive you out of our meeting like Professor Shudari was asking what he was doing in meeting of feminists. Let me appreciate everybody who has been present. The foundation president is one of those, the first to be on the meeting. Professor Biola Odejide has been online. Professor Sogolo, as usual, is with us. Professor Femi Oshofison, thanks for making it to this meeting. Of course, Professor Badejo, far away in Ontario, or where are you, sir? It's good to have you. I saw Mr. Kolade Mosuro,
yeah, I saw him.
of the academy. Professor Folabo, you've managed to bring some people to the platform. I've seen others who are not our members. Professor Bafemi, thanks so much. Our next session is in 2 weeks' time on the 8th of May. Again, we have a very interesting topic, the changing nature of academic and intellectual freedom in Africa. Our speaker is Professor Bayo Lukoshi, formerly of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, a past executive secretary of Podestra, and I'm sure he is currently with the University of Wits in South Africa. I'm sure we're going to have a very interesting engagement. I think I got the consent of Professor Sogolo to chair the session while this meeting was going on. So we're going to have an interesting session. We have run out of time, but Asma is not a member, and I would like to ask that Asma takes a comment before we finally close the session. Asma, do you still want to talk? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
He's
Good
unmuted.
evening,
Yes, please.
everyone. Good evening, and thank you very much for the opportunity. So I've been following the academy, I think, earlier this year, and I'm very much interested about its activities. So I don't know, most of the, a student, a master's student in Kaduna State. So I just want to know, like, how can someone, maybe young academics, is there a way that they can benefit, or you have to reach a professor level before maybe you can benefit from the academy? Thank you.
Of course, you can benefit from the activities of the academy. You are part of this conversation. We are trying to get the young academics in the humanities to join the Nigerian Young Academy, which is for scholars who are not yet professors. The full membership of the academy is open only to professors who are at least 5 years of 5 years standing, but you can still participate in our activities. Our seminars, our dialogue sessions, our conferences are all open to all members of the public. So you are very free to join us. If you send me your, you can send a mail to president@nalonline.org.ng or send a message in the chat box to me. I will put you on our mailing list for all our activities. Thank you very much. Let me close this session and invite you to the next one on Thursday, the 8th of May. Same time, same platform, and looking forward to seeing you. Let me appreciate all those who have made this session a very interesting and engaging one, from our speaker to our chairperson to our lead discussant, Professor Mabel, and all those who ask questions. I'm looking forward to seeing all of us again to continue our conversations in the next session. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you.
Oh, Professor Aruno, it's online.
Yes,
sorry, I didn't see your time. That's our incoming president, Professor Andrew Aruno, is online.
Yes, I saw him.
Yeah. Okay, so Prof, thank you very much.
Thanks, Mrs. Oshigari. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Glad to be able to do this.
Oh, I was honored. Thank you.
Hope you can be our speaker at some point.
Kilevi?
Hope you can be our speaker at some point.
If you invite me.
Of course, you are invited, and everybody is my witness.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so good luck with all your work. Take care and hope to see you at some point.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Bye. Yeah.
Poet Laureate. Bye. Sorrow.
I've been outed.
I'm relieved.
Professor Shudari, how are you?
How are you?
Yes. Fine.
Okay,
Nice seeing you.
Pleasure.
I see Bado.
Well, I don't know. I left there about 4 weeks ago. I'm actually in the US.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's why I've been able to join. It was difficult for me to do this while I was in Nigeria because the broadband in our area was.
It's like that.
Yes, you know.
Terrible.
So
Thank
how
you.
about it?
Well, right too.
Oh, okay.
The manage is the economy that is driving us everywhere. So we don't know what.
Turned every one of us into a manager.
That's it.
But manage with 2 hands, so.
That's it, not with 1 hand.
Not with 1 hand. Okay,
Thank
then.
You. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.